Well, hello, friends and neighbors. John, your whiskey neighbor here, and welcome out to the deck. I know I've been talking Scotch a lot lately, but I think it's time to talk a little bit about bourbon. So today we're going to look at a bottle and bond product. Now, I'm told this is a very affordable bourbon in the U.S. I can't get it here in Canada, but Michael sent me this whole bottle, and so I'm happy to share some thoughts on this J.T.S. Brown Bottled and Bond Kentucky Bourbon. You got a little bourbon or a little bottled and bond bourbon? Why don't you pour a dram and sip along? 3, 4. Well, thanks for staying with me. I know I've been talking a lot of Scotch lately, but I think it's time to take a little bit of a break from Scotch, and maybe a few weeks I'll look into some bourbons, especially, I'm trying to clear my shelf, and some of my bottles are getting pretty down near the bottom. I wanted to talk about this. My understanding is that this J.T.S. Brown Bottle and Bond product is actually really, really affordable. It's like in some market, it's sub $20 in the U.S., and that's amazing. Right? The challenge for me is I don't know what the price would be in my market because I can't even get this bottle. But thanks to generous viewer sending me this bottle, Michael, I just can't thank you enough for the other samples and for a whole bottle that I could try. I've shared with a few others. Just a really, really great gentleman. Thank you so much. So, I don't know enough about the history. I do know that. Oh boy, what was I looked up what the J.T.S. stood for, but this brown is of the Brown-Forman line. However, this is owned, made by and owned by Heaven Hill Distilleries. So it's a Heaven Hill product. Bottle and Bond tells us that, this is distilled in one season, it's released at 100 proof or 50%, and it's at least 4 years old. Let's talk some bourbon. Hope you got something to sample with me on the nose. Boy, coming over from a couple of weeks of Scotch. This is cinnamon, sweet. It's a little bit aggressive on the nose. There's a slight sourness I'm getting too. And, it is... There's an alcohol boom in the nose, but mostly sweet sugars, brown sugars, cooked sugars, and then some already spicier cinnamon forward notes. Let's try it on the palate. Cheers. I'm quite sure the last whiskey I had was actually Canadian last night with another friend through the channel, but I haven't really been having bourbon for a little while. And so I'm immediately struck with that interplay between a higher sweetness with that, predominant corn note. But this one gives me spice. It gives me pepper, mostly cinnamon, and oak, right? There's a more wood forward, like a drying oak when I switch to bourbon. Right now I'm getting, I've shared it before, but like that, you're finishing off a popsicle and you've got that popsicle stick going on, that kind of wood presence that you sure don't get, or at least I really don't get in Scotch very easily. So I'm clearly in bourbon territory. Let's have another sip. A little vanilla, slight butterscotch, more cinnamon. It's a little drying and slightly bitter metallic on the finish. For a sub $20 US bottle, I would never complain, and I would likely have this on my shelf very often. It's just classic bourbon profile, not a lot of fruit, little more spice and oaks, but boy, affordable and fun to drink. Not my favorite bourbon for sure, but really enjoyable. And again, Michael, thanks so much. If I were to rate it, for me, it's probably 3.5 stars. It's not going to change anyone's mind. Classic bourbon profile, and as I said, so affordable. well, as I like to do if I can, I wanted to compare it to something else. And so I do have Wild Turkey 101. In my neighborhood or market, there really is, for me, there isn't a better bourbon for the kind of price. I can get this for $26 Canadian. It's 101 proof. It's just such a classic, you know. So 50.5 versus 50. I believe it's a mix of, you know, 6 and 8 year old. So certainly over the 4. I think it really begs to be compared to this J.T.S. Brown. So let's just try a little bit of Wild Turkey 101. On the nose, this brings in what I now look for, that classic slight sourness. Cinnamons are actually back a little bit, and I'm getting some char or oak. Still fairly dry on the nose, not a lot of fruit forward, but a unique sourness. Let's try it on the palate. Cheers. So this gives me a little more depth in the palate. Coat's a little nicer. It just feels a little thicker. The spicing is not just edges and cinnamons, but it actually kind of hugs. A little deeper, feels a little more rye. And the palate cleans up nicely and gets me into the oaks without a lot of bitterness hanging around. Quick other sip. Little roast. Got a slight bit of fruiting there, little cooked something, apple or cherry. Can't quite place it, but it's fairly clear that I really like Wild Turkey 101 more than J.T.S. Brown. Again, if the J.T.S. Brown was in my market and it was somehow less than $26 Canadian, I still think I would have it around. It's a solid, you know, it would be great perking up an old fashioned or doing a whiskey sour or something punchy. I think it adds a lot of backbone, but it's got a couple of knocks. The biggest knock for me on the J.T.S. Brown is that kind of bitter metallic finish, which if it didn't have, I think I'd like it a bit more. But certainly in this comparison, if this is 3.5, this is over 4. It just is 4.25, which is crazy for that kind of price. And that's probably why it's sitting at 4.25. 4 stars for sure. Anyways, thanks for joining me here. I'll try to clean up all the wind and the howling and maybe make it a video worth watching. But I can't shoot it in the nook because right now the whole family has decided we need to redo the basement. So hopefully I'll see you soon. You guys, thanks for tuning in. Have a great week.